Megatron, evil leader of the Decepticons. Introduced in 1984, this technological tyrant of a character has chilled and thrilled fans and continues to do so to this day. His toys continue to be top sellers, he has appeared on many different television shows, and he even had a gun named after him in the novel World War Z. In this video, we'll trace the roots of this icon of evil and follow him on his pop culture journey. I'm Captain Kyle, and I'll be your host for the story of Megatron. Megatron came on the scene as part of the first wave of a new Hasbro toy line known as the Transformers. This was their answer to a rival toy line known as the GoBots. Now, Transformers came about through a partnership between Hasbro and Takara, which saw a number of different transforming robot toy lines brought together under one brand. Now, the toy line that Megatron came from was called Microman. Now, Microman was a toy line that produced action figures that were 3 3/4 inches tall, which is a pretty standard size for action figures. However, in the case of Microman, they were supposed to be the actual size of the character, not a scaled down version of a human character. Now, eventually this toy line spawned a few sublines, including the Microchange line. This consisted of robots that changed into everyday objects like tape players and even guns. This is one version of the Microchange toy that would come to be known as Megatron, but initially he was known as Gun Robo P-38. And the variation that ended up becoming Megatron in the US was the Gun Robo Walther P-38 Uncle, which came with a silencer, scope, and a stock. Oddly, as the Transformer line came together, the Japanese version of Megatron was not the same one as used in the US. In fact, was very similar to this, only a flat gray without any of the stock silencer or additional attachments, and therefore no arm cannon for Megatron. Now, when Hasbro took these various toy lines and united them under the Transformers brand, they turned to Marvel Comics to come up with names for these characters and a compelling story. Bob Budiansky came up with the vast majority of the names and character bios for these Transformer characters, including that of Megatron. But this toy was almost not called Megatron.
When I submitted the name to Hasbro, they initially rejected the name, which was, of course, their prerogative because it's their toy. And on the occasions, and there weren't that many occasions when they rejected a name, I figured, well, sometimes it was a legal problem. They would have their lawyers do a legal search on any name I submitted. So there was a legal problem that there was a conflict out there that couldn't use that name. But in the case of Megatron, I really liked the sound of Megatron. I thought it was really an appropriate name. It really caught the flavor of what I was trying to do. And they rejected it. So I asked them, I said, so before I come up with some new names, some alternative names for Megatron, can I ask you, why are you rejecting Megatron? And they said, well, we think it sounds too scary. And I said, well, he is the leader of the Decepticons. He's supposed to be scary. And that changed their thinking and said, okay, I guess you're right. They kept it, which I'm very happy because I think of all the names that I came up with for all the Transformer characters I wrote, Megatron's my favorite name.
Now, Bob was the editor of the initial 4-issue limited series that started in May of 1984, and he would go on to become the regular series writer starting with issue 5. During the limited series, Megatron would lead his evil Decepticons against the heroic Autobots, and also plot to take Earth's energy. Now, initially, the Transformers comic universe was integrated in the greater Marvel comic universe, so Megatron actually encountered Spider-Man in issue number 3. But the end of the 4-issue limited series saw the Decepticons defeated and the Autobots victorious right before a new Decepticon came to defeat them all. Now, the comic book definitely helped promote the toy line. This is the 1984 Megatron toy that would come to be known as Generation 1 Megatron. This was released in stores and also later as a mail-away figure. And the comic book definitely helped make these toys popular with children. While the comic book was in full swing, a cartoon series co-produced by Marvel and Sunbow Productions would soon be hitting the airwaves. Now, even more than a comic book, a cartoon would definitely help to promote the toy line. And due to changes in regulations, you could now actually produce a cartoon to support a line of toys. Now, the casting of the show brought in some of the most talented voice actors in the industry. And for a villain of Megatron's magnitude, they needed a great voice. And they found it with Frank Welker.
When I went into audition for Megatron, I fell in love with Megatron because I found out that he was the lead evil guy, so I figured he's got to be in every show. So I looked at it and I knew that I had to come up with a voice that was really unique. So I had this deep voice that I kind of used for Soundwave eventually, but it sort of got me into Megatron, and it was based on Barry White. And Barry had this kind of really deep, silky voice, which I didn't use, but I used it as the bass, and it was like,
I love you, baby. I need you, baby. I want you, baby.
I said, now who can pass up a voice like that, you know? And so I used that as a basis of thinking, you know, deep, big Transformer character, but it needed to have that kind of metallic pain sound. And I had a thing that I used to do called the Cave of Winds. And I tried to do it, and see if I can do it now, but it's like multiple voices in a cave, and I'll see if I can do it. Oh, I am in a cave. I am freezing. I want a jacket. So I thought if I combine that with Barry White, I am Megatron, leader of the Decepticons. Thank you.
Frank would also voice some other characters, including Soundwave, Rumble, and Skywarp. But as leader of the Decepticons, Megatron had a presence that could not be matched. Now, the origins of Megatron as a character varied. In the comic book, Megatron was a gladiator located in Tarn, a city on Cybertron, which is the Transformers' homeworld. He had ambitions to turn the planet itself into a galaxy-conquering dreadnought. Later, comic books by Dreamwave and IDW would expand on his origin and his early days on Cybertron. In the cartoon, his origins were not as well defined, though they did show him being built by some Decepticons. In fact, the Constructicons. He was to be a new, powerful warrior to continue the war against the Autobots for control of Cybertron. Megatron was shown to be instrumental in the creation of his nemesis, Optimus Prime. Now, his origins and relationship with Optimus Prime would be changed through the years. However, in both the comic book and the cartoon continuities, Megatron led his Decepticons in a vicious attack against the Autobots, who were in a spacecraft called the Ark. During the battle, the Ark crashed into a planet called Earth, where all the Transformers ended up in a state of suspended animation for 4 million years. They would be awakened in 1984 when a volcanic eruption re-energized the ship they were in. In the cartoon continuity, Megatron constantly came up with new schemes to steal Earth's energy and defeat the Autobots, all while staving off attempts by other Decepticons, well, mainly Starscream, to usurp his position as leader of the Decepticons. His plots included defeating Optimus Prime in single combat by borrowing the special abilities of his troops, teaming up with a human scientist to enslave the human race, bringing the planet Cybertron into Earth's orbit to generate lots of energy, and even going as far as framing the Autobots as evildoers to get them banished from the planet. However, more often than not, you would hear Megatron issue the command, "Decepticons, retreat!" as the Autobots foiled his plans. In the comic book realm, Megatron did not have so easy of a time maintaining his command over the Decepticons. In issue 5, the Decepticon Shockwave took over as leader. Megatron was still weakened from his defeat by the Autobots and their human allies, but eventually attempted to retake command. He is defeated, loses his memory, ends up lost, and eventually falls into the hands of humans. Later, he would find his way back to the Decepticons and manage to resume command. He would eventually face off against Optimus Prime in issue 24 in a video game where the consequences of losing are destruction. Optimus wins, but then he concedes defeat when he realizes the only way he won was by breaking rules he never would have broken in real life. What a guy. Megatron is declared the winner, and Optimus is destroyed, apparently. But victory proved a little too much for Megatron, as he starts to go a little bit mad in the next issue, thinking that Optimus Prime is returning. He's attacked by the Predacons and ends up running into a space bridge, which, in his madness, he blasts, and it sends him on his way to oblivion, or so it seems. Now, while the comic book plodded along without either Optimus or Megatron, the popular cartoon series had spawned an animated movie. Transformers the movie brought the regular voice cast to the big screen, as well as bringing in other popular actors of the time, such as Orson Welles, Robert Stack, Judd Nelson, and Leonard Nimoy. But most of the first part of the movie was dominated by the regular voice cast and an epic battle between Optimus and Megatron. This final battle turned against Megatron, and Optimus Prime was about to finish him off when another Autobot, Hot Rod, interfered. This allowed Megatron to gain the upper hand, and he blasted Optimus Prime, wounding him mortally, though not before Optimus struck Megatron one more time, leaving him weakened and helpless. As the Decepticons retreated, as they do a lot, Megatron was brought on board their escape craft, a triple changer named Astrotrain, by Soundwave, his loyal lieutenant. So as they're making their way back to Cybertron, Astrotrain lets the Decepticons inside him know that they need to jettison some weight or they'll never make it to their destination. Starscream, who has made no secret of his desire to become leader of the Decepticons, consigns Megatron to the depths of space, despite his protests.
Wait, I still function.
Wanna bet?
Megatron and several other Decepticons were abandoned to their fate. However, their damaged forms were intercepted by Unicron, a planet-sized being with incredible power. He makes a deal with Megatron, providing him a new body and new troops in exchange for him agreeing to destroy the Autobot Matrix of Leadership. This is a repository of wisdom and power that's held within the physical form of the leader of the Autobots. Apparently it was the one thing, the only thing, that could stand in Unicron's way. While negotiations were tense, Megatron finally agreed and was reformatted into the being known as Galvatron. He also soon discovered that Unicron could cause him great pain if he balked or refused to do what he was told, more than he had certainly bargained for. So Megatron had become Galvatron, and for the remainder of the movie was voiced by Leonard Nimoy. Galvatron transformed into a futuristic energy cannon. He reasserted himself as the rightful leader of the Decepticons by utterly destroying Starscream. He then led his Decepticons after the Autobots and managed to capture the Matrix. He then, of course, attempted to use it to enslave Unicron. Things didn't go as planned for Galvatron, as he found himself unable to open the Matrix to use it on Unicron. Later, in a battle with the new leader of the Autobots, Rodimus Prime, he was thrown through a wall and into the depths of space, and with him out of the way, Rodimus Prime used the Matrix to destroy Unicron. So of course, with the introduction of Galvatron in the movie, a toy was made, though for some reason he was billed as City Commander rather than overall leader. Perhaps this was to avoid spoiling the movie? The toy also could change into a laser cannon and a futuristic gun, though that form was never used in the cartoon or comics. The one concern about this toy was the color scheme, as he was gray instead of the purple of the animated character. Now also in Japan, they released a version of Megatron called Goodbye Megatron, which was packaged with Starscream as well, as Starscream did not survive the movie. Megatron didn't survive unchanged, so I guess that was enough. Now in Japan though, this was the first edition of Megatron to come with his sight that could actually then become his arm cannon. And the blue plastic was replaced with red, making it match the character in the cartoon and bringing it in line with the US release, though the artwork on the packaging still showed the blue highlights. Back to Galvatron, there were additional non-transforming toys made. The most popular of these being the Super Hybrid model, which had the correct color scheme. There was even a non-accurately colored version in a transforming model kit from Transformers Gum. But in 2005, which was also the year the Transformers movie was set, a more accurately colored version of the original toy was released in Japan. It even came with the Matrix of Leadership. The movie also spawned a 3-issue comic book adaptation. Speaking of comics, we should also mention that there was also a Transformers UK comic magazine. Now, while a lot of the material in the UK version of the Transformers comic book was from the US, there were a great many original stories. With the movie introducing many new characters, this opened up a number of new storylines in the UK that featured these Transformers.
We focused much more on Galvatron and Rodimus Prime, you know, taking those characters from the animated movie and making them our focal leaders. You know, Ultra Magnus, Rodimus Prime, Galvatron, they became very much the quote-unquote new leaders in the UK comics.
Some of these UK exclusive tales were time travel stories, which provided an opportunity for Megatron and Galvatron to meet.
As soon as we had the future Megatron, it was going to be fun just to play around with that, and we played around a lot of the paradoxes, and then of course, you know, the actual meeting between Megatron and Galvatron instigates this temporal instability in the whole of space and time, and you know, we had this big saga called Time Wars. So yeah, it was always, you know, let's bring them together and make it a bad thing.
Now, after the events of the movie, the cartoon continued, but it was set in the future. Galvatron was found in a pool of lava on an alien world by his Decepticon followers. The Decepticons were desperate for a leader as they had been utterly defeated after Galvatron's disappearance. Now, after his rescue, Galvatron resumed leading the Decepticons against the Autobots, though his mental state seemed a bit more erratic and unstable than when he was Megatron. Now, it's a bit of a fan theory that either the final battle or the time in the lava actually fused those pain circuits that Unicron was using to control him into a permanently on state. Now, despite the constant pain, Galvatron could function because he'd gotten used to it, but it still caused some irritability and instability. Now, at one point, his Decepticon followers brought him to a planet that was supposed to be able to cure mental disease. It turned out to be a trap, but Galvatron's very madness ended up saving him and his troops. Galvatron continued to lead and ended up being the very last Decepticon infected by the Hate Plague, which occurred at the end of Season 3, and heralded the return of Optimus Prime. He was also rather displeased with the integration of organic beings into Cybertronian bodies as seen in Rebirth, the 3-episode 4th season of Transformers, which actually introduced the Headmasters and the Target Masters. Once his plan to destroy both Earth and Cybertron was foiled, he was last seen fleeing in the giant Decepticon Scorponok. He was in the company of Lord Zarek, an evil Nebulon. However, while the cartoon went in one direction, the comic book went in another. Megatron, thought to have been destroyed in issue 25, had ended up on Cybertron wandering around, and he had lost his memory. Seems to happen a lot to him. But once he regained his memories, he returned to Earth, plotting his return to leading the Decepticons, and he captured the Autobot medic Ratchet to help him with his plans. He decides to use what is known as Pretender technology to repair and restore Starscream. Now, Starscream had managed to acquire incredible power at one point before being defeated by an alliance of both Autobots and Decepticons. Ratchet manages to sabotage Megatron's plans and tries to keep the Decepticon from escaping via a dimensional portal. There's an explosion, and it was thought that both Megatron and Ratchet had perished. But they were oddly fused together and floated in unspace, whatever that is, for quite some time, but eventually were brought into the real universe and separated. Now, by this time, Bob Budiansky, who had written the majority of the comics in the US series, had moved on. Simon Furman, who had written a lot of the UK original stories, took over on the US comic. And just like in the UK comic, he arranged for a meeting between a time-traveling Galvatron and Megatron. They were actually on the Ark, that spacecraft that crashed into Earth all those millions of years ago, but it was repaired, so it could fly now. There was a great battle between Galvatron and Megatron, but eventually they decide to join forces, until Ratchet foils their plans by crashing the Ark into the Earth again, which apparently destroyed everyone on board. You know, maybe Ratchet is Megatron's nemesis, because he appears to have done a lot more to foil Megatron's plans than Optimus Prime ever did. So Megatron was apparently dead in the comic. Galvatron was still active in the cartoon universe, but the series ended, and his leadership, well, the future of it, was certainly in doubt. Megatron's journey in the US continuity of G1 appeared to be over, though Hasbro still had one more offering. Without any real story explanation, Hasbro released a new Megatron in the Action Master line. Action Masters were non-transforming robots, many of which were modeled after original Transformers characters that came with special accessories or vehicles. Megatron came with a large tank that could become a base for other Decepticon Action Masters, and even had a flying throne for the Decepticon leader. The G1 version of Megatron would continue to impact the Transformers brand for years to come. In 2001, the first of many reissues of the original G1 Megatron was released in Japan, and included the ability to shoot small plastic bullets. Unfortunately, because of his resemblance to a real gun and new regulations regarding the sale of toy guns, Hasbro did not release a US version of this toy. US collectors had to import the new version from Japan. Also, a special e-hobby edition of the character was released, commemorating his original micro-change coloration. While the Generation 1 US line of toys and stories came to a close, Megatron would return, and Galvatron would be seen again in the Japanese deviation from the US cartoon, where they ignored Rebirth and started a new series called Headmasters, and Megatron himself would emerge in a new form in the Generation 2 line. But those tales are for next time. I hope you enjoyed this look at an iconic character and encourage you to revisit the comic books and cartoons to learn more. We will see you in part 2 as we continue the story of Megatron.